All right, good morning, people. Bob here, back once again, preparing to break down some Bitcoin. Let's get right down to it. One thing I did want to actually touch on that I failed to point out yesterday was this, and so I on most of my charts I've switched to Heikin-Ashi candles, and I just find them to be more useful for the purpose of identifying mostly like continuation of patterns or continuation of moves. So like when you're looking at this chart, it would look fairly different. And by switching it back over to the normal candles, I wanted to point out one thing here, and I don't. Let's ignore the volume for a minute, even though this volume is extreme through here, right? I mean, when I was talking about the potential for a reversal, we had a ton of volume come in there. We've had a fairly significant amount of downside volume come in, but we're also seeing some pretty. Don't get me wrong, the it's still big volume with big decreases and everything, but we are getting to a point where somebody's buying it, right? I mean, again, I always try to point that out. Like, yes, somebody's selling it, but somebody's buying it. Now, if you see big red candles up here, and especially on shorter time frames, then yeah, I mean, it's safe to assume that there's going to be continuation until you get, a huge enough, counter purchase or counter to whatever the movement is. Either way, what I wanted to point out here was that simply by switching it back over to the normal candles, one thing that you can see is that this particular candle here, the body of the candle, is slightly larger than the body of this candle. That is bullish engulfing. And I pointed that out to Matt, I guess whatever day that would have been, June 19th, so it would have been Sunday. And sometimes you look at these things and you get granular again, and you fail to account for that. But I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, here's the line I had. We had our bullish engulfing. What did it do? Came back down, tested just to that level, popped back up overnight, another little pop. So, that being understood, let's go ahead and take a look at some other time frames here and see. I mean, I would say that at least for the moment, there is at least something of an uptrend started here. Maybe it comes up here, comes back down, retests. I don't know if you guys may recall, this has been so long ago now, that when we initially started this parabola, and I was maybe looking at a smaller portion of it, I was like, normally when these parabolas recover, they'll recover at a certain point, bounce, kind of double bottom out of there. That may be finally, who knows, that might finally be what we're going to end up getting here. We come up here, get whatever move we're going to get, fire back down, and then boom, off we go. And again, maybe we don't even get, since we got a bullish engulfing candle there, maybe we don't even hit as far down as I'm, potentially thinking there. But also, too, this was the other thing that I found very entertaining, and I just failed to account for it in my thought process yesterday, was, again, this was a bullish engulfing 4-hour candle, or at least as damn close to as you can get, and then suddenly you get 4-hour double bottom here. And now we've been on this rise since. Really thought this was going to round out a little bit. On my other chart, you'll see I had this kind of rounding out, and then it's just started coasting back up. So, again, at this point, even though this level did break down briefly yesterday, as long as Bitcoin can now hold this level right here, then our potential inverse head and shoulders concept can hold water. I just, again, kind of looking at volume, I'm still seeing selling volume outweighing buying volume. So I don't necessarily know that our downside push is over, but it's nice to see it moving back to the upside. And again, the big thing's going to be that we need more from you, Bitcoin. We love you and all, but we need more from you here. And when I say that, we need to recover back above the 50 monthly moving average. and then we need to recover back above the 200 weekly moving average. And thus this gets us pretty close to the 50 monthly right now. This is fairly close there. We are still right about here, I'd say, is where the weekly is. So realistically, this is where we want to end up the week, above this level, in order to assume that the that this in fact is not going into a long drawn out bear market, right? Like that's what we're going to need to see in order to believe that that's even feasible at this point. Again, I don't even have any problem. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen at this point, but I don't have any problem if Bitcoin did come back down and retest this level, because I think that would be a big, beautiful double bottom there, spread out over a course of a couple of days. So I think that there would be some positivity to that. But that bullish engulfing, I think at the same time, it does a huge thing. It presents a huge positive scenario as well. I mean, it's not very often that you're going to see something on a daily be a bullish engulfing, but if you want to see a bullish engulfing, let's go ahead and take a look back over here when Bitcoin finally did recover out of this garbage that took place from basically May 19th on until late July. Interesting that when it was finally ready to recover out of there, and I mean, this one, don't get me wrong, this one here was totally a bullish engulfing candle. That was too, but this is at the bottom of long-term moves. Boom. The next day was flat. Third day was up good. And then it just kind of cascaded from there. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got going on over here. We're so far away from the 21 moving average right now that we can't even see it basically in this, right? Like that's how far away it is. So it is a totally different circumstance, right? Like we're not in a position where we're working on gaining the support of it. Now we're just trying to get back to it. And you can see here, this price action, once it came way down here, it did eventually fire back up to at least attempt to put a touch on the 21. We've been so far away from even touching the damn thing that it's to the point where it just cannot stay down here for forever, right? Like the price action either has to come up to it or it has to come down. But at this point, I mean, it's so far away that at some point we have to move back up to it. So this is fairly logical. I think that at the end of the day, this is a fairly logical thing for us to be going through right now. And there are some signs that, again, and I almost hate to say it. I mean, this thing is probably not just going to V off out of here. The likelihood of that's fairly slim. But I mean, there are some positive things that we could look at here. All this price action right there, this RSI right here, this RSI is way down here, and yet this held a fairly equal level. Now it did, again, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I mean, it's basically, there's very few times in history that Bitcoin has gotten this oversold on several levels. The daily, the weekly, the monthly, like it's fairly uncommon. But nonetheless, here we are. This is at least a positive start. Do I expect that this thing's just going to rip off like 10 straight green days? Probably not. But I think at this point it's more logical to believe that we are going to potentially at least recover to this level. And if we don't necessarily recover to it or above it, then at that point we could pretty well assume, like if it comes up here and it never closes above this level, then we can assume that there is more downside coming in the more immediate term. But let's go ahead for just a brief moment. Let's kick back over to the shorter term chart, the one I use for like active daily trading, and just kind of take a look here. And here was the rounding that I mentioned earlier in this video today. But again, when I was talking yesterday, I said, hey, look, we get above this level, just have to hold it. And then all of a sudden a inverse head and shoulders really becomes a logical pattern here. And I still think that at this point, now that because this right here, you could essentially call this almost a bullish fake out. I mean, I think that there was probably a lot of people looking at this saying the same thing I was, like, all right, cool, we hold this level. All of a sudden, that's you're longing that, but that would have, somebody would have bought it here, potentially bought it as it was coming down through this line, and then, maybe they get stopped out there. So that's this market, right? I mean, we've been through this enough to know that that's just this market, like that's what happens. It wants to prevent the most people from making the most money, or it wants to take the most from the most, and that's just how it works, right? Like, again, it did exactly what I was considering yesterday. Just first, it had to go ahead and show you something else, and then it actually double bottom right here. It didn't quite hit the measured move from the downside target of this kind of rising wedge. So, at this point, there's at least some bullish, concept to be made here for Bitcoin, at least temporarily. Again, I'm not saying, look out, here we go. We're heading back to, 50, 60,000. Nor am I even saying we're necessarily heading at 25,000. Because really, I mean, this right now, this could end up just being a bearish retest of this. Comes back down, maybe puts in another touchdown down here, or maybe it just comes down to about this 20,800 level, and then we get our next leg up. But this is like the line in the sand, as best I can tell. This one right here, we got to recover to above this, or maybe it's even this level right here. But I think it's somewhere right between here and here. That got to see that recovered by the end of the month. And really, again, we're already more or less to the point where we've got a sufficient recovery to be above the 50 on the monthly, but we got to maintain that now. And this could potentially right here, this could just be a bearish retest of this level. Then maybe I can move this over and say, all right, well, technically now let's use that. If this, say it does come back down and then this level holds up, that I'm not totally opposed to that one working out either. I just want to see this one hold up, because that would be a pattern I can more easily identify. Or again, maybe this itself was a bullish fake out. It is going to come right back down into here. We're going to get that double bottom that, that would make for a more sustainable recovery. And then boom, off and running right back into something like this, where we come down, round it back out. But this is a good, I do look at this and I think of this, we talked about it before, the different patterns and how they could play out. Well, this was at least potentially a more bullish pattern. And again, if we go back to the May through July, it formed a falling wedge. Here, when we were talking about trying to get a recovery, it never really gave us a vastly identifiable pattern, really. At some point, I guess we could say that it ended up being something of a bear flag, but I don't even know if that could be said. It was just totally sideways. This had a pattern. This looks like, and maybe we could say it looked similar to this did over here. Falling wedge, broke to the upside, but then it just traveled flat and sideways. This one already has a little bit different feel to it. Again, none of this to say that there's not more downside coming, because there very well could be. But if we're gonna look for, again, signs of a potential reversal, this was a very good-looking falling wedge pattern. You could have called it a falling channel if you want to. I could have moved this down in here, said that this was a bear fake, but I still think that the concept of this being a falling wedge, and then this entire thing essentially being a bearish fake out, and you could even look at it and just kind of see how there's some logic to the reversal here. You had this little final, let's call this the blow off top, if you will. And don't get me wrong, you could see here it happened plenty of times too, but this one just has a different feel to it. I don't know if anybody else is looking at that and saying the same thing, but it just has a different feel than what we saw over here. But again, it all comes back to, we have to recover certain levels, and right now price action is basically sitting on top of this one. So as long as Bitcoin can maintain this level for a little bit longer, boom, get another pop, clear this level, pop, clear this level. Sounds great to me. Will it happen? Tough to say. I mean, the RSI. So we got that hourly double top yesterday. It did come down. It just didn't come down far. I mean, the bulls bought it back up, which is great. Now we're back to a point where we're again topping out. This time, probably a little bit of the same. I mean, we're in a position where we've got a top that's on the RSI same level as these ones, and yet the price action's up higher. You know, chances are pretty good that'll end up being a bearish divergence, which you're technically seeing the effect of already. Just a matter of how far down it's going to come, and I figure I'm going to be looking for that 20,800 level to potentially hold up this time around. But you know, tough to say. I mean, I got to drop some trend lines on here from some of the overnight action. I was a little surprised actually it broke through this trend line. I was expecting it would not, and that essentially on the hourly we got, you know, the initial move, pullback. I really expected this to roll over, give us one more pullback down into this territory, and then a pop. But obviously it didn't do that. So I don't know. I do think that there's just as good a chance today that we're going to see positive or negative price action. But again, I think that I've got a pretty good sense of where those numbers should come out should that end up happening. Pre-market stocks, at least refreshing my screen right this moment, all of the indices are up decently, slightly to yeah, actually they're all up 1.5% ish. So I would say that it's, as long as we're not opening up straight into overhead resistance once again. And let's see, S&P. Well, I mean, there's there's a little less resistance in any of the cases at this point, just because there's we're a little far down the chart there. And yeah, so I mean, as far as the pre-market goes, 37.38 is what it's opening at, which would get us back above some levels that were lost. Yeah, I mean, look, I almost hate to try and say it again, but I mean, there are some signs, once again, that we could start to see some level of recovery out of the S&P as well. Potential weekly double bottom on the RSI with some bullish divergence. We've got a daily chart that actually the RSI looked fairly similar to Bitcoin prior to this move here. So maybe, you know, maybe the S&P does give us one more downside little push there than just to fire back up off of it. We're going to find out real soon. But hey, we appreciate you guys. Always appreciate you tuning in, listening to this stuff. Hopefully it actually helps some people out, makes you feel good or bad about the market or the prospects of it. But you know, hopefully it does something for somebody out there, and we enjoy this. I know I enjoy doing the videos, so looking forward to catching up again. Appreciate you as always. Talk soon.